Hi, I'm Gary Gruber, and I wanted to somewhat vary this from a few times before that I've been on College Week Live, but I'll answer all your questions. But I want to just get something just straight out to you that when you take a test, you want to get involved with the test. You know, a lot of people ask me at the end, well, what do I do? You know, in a few words or so, what do I do before I take, when I take the test? I mean, what's my psychology, so to speak? And you want to get into a position where you get involved with the test. So when you look at a question, you extract something from the question that leads you to the next step, and then gradually leads you to the answer. So instead of getting fixated with the feeling of, I got to get an answer, get involved with the process. That's a very key word, process. In fact, I wrote something recently for the Huffington Post on exactly why people weren't using process and why they should be using it. Everybody wants a fast answer. So, and you'll get the answer by going through the process. So, and you want to develop your curiosity. In fact, that's the way to develop your curiosity, by going through the process. So that you can look at a question and say, gee, that's interesting. I could have done that. Or they're asking for something like this. They say an odd number, and I'm going to use that. Or something like in a sentence completion, it says desist. And I say, oh my God, I don't know what the word desist is. But if I know that DE means away from, like detract, then I can figure out there's something negative connotation. Now look what that does. That spurs you on psychologically to say, wow, I see that there's some negative thing going on there. I wonder if I can figure out the overall negative aspect of this sentence completion or this reading passage. And that makes you get more involved and more interested in the passage or the sentence completion in that sense. So let's look at one of the questions that actually quite a few students in California did not get because they just didn't know the strategy. And again, I want to mention that strategies are a key thing. This is a very you're looking at a question, and instead of rushing into the question, you say, well, what strategy should I use? So I look at a question like this, and this will also fire you up into wanting to go to the next question. What percent of 5 is 20? So I say, do I put the is over the of? Do I put the of? What do I do with this thing? Do this almost mechanically, and the strategies will enable you. I want to mention this. Strategies will enable you to do this mechanically, in the sense that you don't have to do much brain racking or thinking, I would say. I mean, you have to think, but you don't have to do brain racking, thinking. So I look at this and I say, well, what do I do with a thing like this? What percent of 5 is 20? And I just want to show you that 65% of California students got the wrong answer. Had they used a strategy, they would have got the right answer. In fact, when we did a study, in fact, I have this here. This is the 212 book. I have a 214 book now. Actually, a 215 book out now. By the way, on the site, you can see, in fact, even my website, which is, by the way, the website is, let me just get back to that website. It's www.thegarygruber.com, and I do have the 215 books out now. So, you may want to take a look at those. But let's get back to this question. What percent of 5 is 20? So, if I had used this strategy, every time I see a what, I put an X. Every time I see a percent, I put an over 100. Every time I see an X, I put a times, and it is an equals. Look what happens. The what becomes an X, the percent becomes over 100, the of becomes a times, the 5 becomes a 5, is an equals, and the 20 is a 20, of course. I don't have to do any thinking. This becomes X divided by 100 times 5 is equal to 20. And then I use another strategy, I multiply both sides by 100. Now you can say, well, what strategy is that? Anytime I see an equation, try to get rid of the fractions. Try to get it all under one level. So I'm going to get rid of the 100 by multiplying both sides by 100. And I get x times 5 is equal to 20 times 100 equals 2,000. Now, I want to get the x alone, so I just divide both sides by 5. I get x equals 400. And that's essentially how I can do any question that involves translating words to math. And this is like a 30-point strategy on the, at least a 30-point strategy on the SAT, because each question you get right on the SAT, you get approximately 10 more points. So you get another, if you got 3 more questions right, using a strategy like this, you get 30 points. And that's why these strategies are just great, because you can just rack up your points tremendously. So the strategies are key aspects of this thing. Now, we can do another question if you want. Let's go to another example. Here's a classic thing. I prefer to do describe the strategies, because these are the things that, you want to say, oh, well, this is what I want to try to use. Now, all of these are in my books, and with lots of practice and stuff like that. So, of course, you get hold of the book, and in fact, one of the things you might want to take is a strategy diagnostic test in the book to track your thinking. And, one of the great aspects of that is that by you may be answering a question a very long and tedious way, and even get disgusted answering it that way. But if you know the right strategy, you'll answer faster. So I have a strategy diagnostic test. It's unique. Nobody has this. Where I ask a question and then say, how did you solve the question? And based on your solution, I track the thinking approach. I say, well, that's right, but you could have done this. This is all in my book. So you can, in fact, I think I have this in all the books, in the GRE and the PSAT, so in the ACT. So you can do this where you can check to see how you're answering the question. Very important, because one thing that really is unfortunate is that the SAT test and the ACT test should be weighted answered, where if you got the wrong answer and you did something right, you should get some credit, which increases your self-esteem. So like, let's say as an example, what's the average rate of a car going uphill at 30 miles an hour and downhill at 40 the same distance? You could say, well, 30 and 40 divided by 2 is 35. 35 is the answer. Let's say you got the answer 35. That's not the right answer. The average rate is not the same as the average of the rates. So what you want to, on a test, I'd give partial credit for that. I'd say you knew what average was, but you didn't realize that the average rate is not the same as the average of the rates. But at least give credit for the fact that you know what the meaning of average was. So anyway, that's a something that test is a kind of interesting test that way. I also have what's interesting is the shortest SAT test. In fact, I had this in quite a few newspapers a while ago, where essentially it was I developed questions which tracked the kids' approximate SAT score, but just based on about 20 questions. And that you might want to take, because that's loaded with strategies. And then, taking practice tests and going through the answers and going through the explanatory answers is important. So, I would look at a lot of that stuff. Why don't we go on to another example while we're in this mode here? Let's see. Now here's an interesting example that actually I mentioned to the College Board, and one of the reasons I think that they're having is the calculator section to be different. Where there's in the 216 exam, the calculator section there's going to be a separate calculator section where you're allowed to use a calculator. Other sections you're not allowed to use a calculator. And this is one of the questions I brought up to them. I said, well, what happens if you have 2/3 times 3/4 times 4/5 times 5/6 times 6/7, and the kid is allowed to use a calculator? I wouldn't let the kid use a calculator with that. I want the kid to think about how they would do a thing like this. And this will inform, and they're going to do this on the new SAT test. What you look at a question like this, and there's something curious going on. It is a 3 in the denominator, a 3 in the numerator, a 4 in the denominator, a 4 in the numerator. Why don't we just, and this is, you want to do this 10 seconds without a calculator, why don't we just cross off the numerators and denominators, which are the same? And what do we get? We just fill up those 2 sevens. So there are times when you want to use a calculator. I mean, if I have 14 times 9, I'm going to use a calculator. If I have 14 times 10, I'm not going to use a calculator. Okay, should we do, let's say, should we do another question? Let's see if we, should do another question. No, why don't we do a question like this? I'll let you think about this for a while. And we'll get to the verbal also. Points A and B and X do not lie on the same line. Point X is 5 units from A and 3 units from B. How many other points in the same plane as A and B and X are also 5 units from A and 3 units from B? Let me let you think about this for a while. Well, maybe instead of spending a time, well, we have the time. I mean, we want to draw points, making sure that A, B, and X are not lying on the same line. Now we consider all the possibilities. You can get this all in my books, by the way. The key thing is to draw lines. I'll just go over this fast. I mean, with other questions I'll do maybe in more detail. But you want to draw lines so that you can see this thing like this. I may be going too fast with it, but I did want to get to the next example. Let's get to the next example with this. Okay, a four-sided figure ABCD contains interior angle, right angle C. AB is 12 and BC is 3. CD equals 4, okay, and AB equals 13. What is the area of ABCD? Now, let's say I'm taking the exam. And I look at this question and I say, God, how do I get the area from these numbers here? And then I would say, well, what I probably do is probably use a strategy. What strategy can I use? Why don't I draw lines to see if I get more information out of it? Do you know that very few teachers say this? When they describe geometry, and they say, 2 sides of a triangle are equal, and I want to prove that the base angles are equal. And they say, I drop a perpendicular down. Very few teachers, in fact, I haven't seen any teachers that did this, would say, the reason why I drop a perpendicular down is because every time I draw a line, especially if it makes something symmetrical, two other things that look about equal, I get more information out of it. So here's a problem, that I want to find the area where I'm just given the sides. What a brain-racking problem. How the heck do I do that? Let me do something, draw a line down that can give me more information. Let's say I draw that line. What do I get? I get a 3, 4, 5 triangle. I get that as 5. And notice what happens. I get 5 and 12, 13, 3 and 4 and 5, but I can find the areas of both of those triangles. The 3, 4, 5 is just, well, let's do that. The 3, 4, 5 becomes that. And the 5, 12, 13 is just 5 times 12 divided by 2, right? And that's how I would do that. I just want to answer a question that popped up here. It says, Elaine says, I have a phobia from tests. What should I do? That's a great question. What I would do is I would try to get into the mode of, how do I get involved with a test? What's curious about this question? Certainly before the test, you want to learn basic skills. You want to know what an odd number is. You want to know that 3 to the 4th times 3 to the 3rd, you add the exponents. You don't want to think about this on the test. You want to know the basic skills. You want to learn the strategies. That's certainly what I would do, is learn basic skills and strategies. And of course, in my books, you can get that sort of thing. So the idea is that, this is essentially you want to arm yourselves with the basic skills and the strategies. But when you take the test, you want to get involved with the test. You want to use a strategy and a skill, extract something from the problem that'll lead you to the next step. Here's an example of something. This may not be you may say, oh, well, you could do this, Gary, but we can't do this. But let me give you the example. I was in front of an audience, and must have been about 1,000 people in the audience. It was a math training audience for teachers. And I said, you give me any SAT question, and on the spot, if a genius can solve that in less than a minute, then I can solve that in less than a minute. And, I thought I'd go on just to show them the strategies do this sort of thing. So somebody gets up from the college board, I remember, gets up from the audience. I was shocked out of my wits when this happened. Gets up and says, okay, I think he said wise guy. He said, wise guy, I got a question for you. Why don't you try this question? And at first I was going to say, oh, no, we don't have time for this. I didn't want to, it could be embarrassing if I got it wrong after that. He says, okay, here's the question. Coffee and espresso are mixed to give 50 pounds, and the mixture of coffee is this, and the coffee is that. What's the mixture? He gave me the question, and I thought, oh my God, I rush into the answer. What should I do about this? And then I thought, wait a minute, use my own strategies. Extract something from the problem that will lead you to the next step. And I learned a lot from this. And I thought, it says coffee and espresso give 50 pounds. I'll take a chance. Right. C plus E equals 50. And that psychologically made me realize all I need to do, because I need basic skills in that, all I need to do is look at another equation, find another equation that has C and E in it, and I can solve that system. And that motivated me to get that other equation. Had I not done that first step, had I not extracted that thing, I would not have gotten that question right. And then I told him, I said, well, and I was able to get it right. And then I said, and that's how I did it. Now, this is obviously in a very panicky situation. I'm facing 1,000 people, and I made a statement that I could solve any question. Can you imagine how embarrassing that would be if I didn't solve it or I couldn't do it? So anyway, that's what I'm saying. That's an extreme situation. But I'm saying if you can extract something, get your basic skills, get your strategies, and then, extract something from the question that'll lead you to the next step without worrying about the final solution. Einstein said something that was very interesting. He said he was always disappointed when he got the answer to a problem because he was so he enjoyed the process so much that the answer was a letdown. When he got it, that was the end. So, you should look at it this way. It's sort of like, I enjoy talking with you. And I get fired up this way. That's process. When it's over, it's over. That's the end. It's sort of like listening to a piece of music. You like the music, and then the music is very close to all this, by the way. And you enjoy the music, and then the music is over, and that's it. You might have a remembrance of it, and that's good. Just like, I have a remembrance of a lot of math questions that I've done or verbal questions that I've done. So anyway, why don't we look at, let me get one of the verbal questions, if we can. Let's see if, oh, well, wait, we might as well do one of these while if x plus y equals 7 and xy equals 4, find the value of x squared plus y squared, and where x and y may not be integers. Now, you say to yourself, well, do I solve for x and then, in terms of y and then substitute this? And then you got to think to yourself, why did the test maker ask you for x plus y squared, x squared plus y squared? Why didn't they just say, what's x and what's y? Or something like that. So there must be a way of getting the x squared plus y squared from this without having to find out x and having to find out y. And that's first. You figure, oh, okay, now how am I going to do that? Well, you use a strategy. And you want to get a connection between the two equations. In other words, how do I relate x plus y equals 7 and xy equals 4? How do I relate them so that I can find the value of x squared plus y squared? Suppose I squared x squared plus y, x plus y, okay? Now, if I take x plus y and I square it, I get x squared plus y squared equals 7 squared, and that gives me x squared plus y squared plus 2xy equals 49. Okay? Now, I substitute xy equals 4 in that thing, because I'm given that, and then this is what I get. I'll let you look at that for a little while. And then I get x squared plus y squared is 41. So there's a very powerful strategy. I can have a set of equations. I can either add them, subtract them, multiply, divide them, or in one case I square one of the equations so that I represent it, and that can translate, I can figure out how to solve it that way. Well, why don't we do this example while I have it here. A rectangle is inscribed in a quarter circle as shown. The radius of the circle is 5. Find the diagonal. Now, you say to yourself, well, the radius of the circle is 5. Well, how does that relate to the diagonal? Key strategy again, draw lines. You see, if I drew that line, it's a rectangle, so the diagonals are equal. So I get exactly what that is there. I get the answer 5 as an example, as an answer. Let's do I don't know if we should do this one. Why don't we do this one while we're on it? The average of 3 boys, because these are very powerful strategies that I'm giving you here. The average scores of 3 boys is 70. The average scores of 2 girls was 80. What was the average of 5 boys and of all 5 boys and girls? Oh, what a problem! I got to go through this on the exam. Again, you want to use strategies and basic skills, and you want to do it mechanically so you don't rack your brain. So what do I do with a thing like that? First strategy is represent the average. A plus B plus C over 3 is 70. That's the average of 3 boys. It's 70, right? 3 boys and girls. The average, D plus E over 2 is 80. Okay? That's the average of the other 2. So now we get this as an example. And you can see now that by crossing out the fractions, you just get this. By the way, I ought to mention to you, if you want to email me anything. I'll try to answer all your emails. It's the direct email would be Dr. Gary Gruber at yahoo.com. So it's drgaryGruber at yahoo.com. That's a personal email. I'll get that directly from you. I'll know it's from College Week Live, and I can get you. So it's drgaryGruber, Dr. Gary Gruber at yahoo.com. And I'll try to answer all your questions if I can. But this is essentially the third strategy is to add the equations. You have two equations. You can add, subtract, multiply, or divide them. Add the equations, and you get this. Now let's see. Should I show you this question? This is a question that, out of more than 1.2 million students, only a few got it right. Maybe I think 10 or 15 got it right, or something like that, in that number. In the figure, and we'll go with the verbal too for a little while. In the figure above, which is true. Let me let you think about this just for a little while. You want to find, you get an x, y, and z, and then the a is there. And you want to find which of these following things are true. And you say, wow, how do I get, there's not even any numbers there. How do I get that? And remember the strategy, draw a line. What line do you think you draw? Don't make it so difficult for yourself. Draw the simplest line possible, which would be that one. So one at the bottom. So if you draw that line, notice what you get. You get x plus y plus b plus z plus c is equal to 180 for the big triangle. And you get a plus b plus c equals 180 for the smaller triangle. And these two equations, these two over here, when you subtract them, subtract 2 from 1. This is all on my book, by the way. So, my book, so you can, check all the details out of this. You get x plus, that. And that's how to do that one. By the way, let's see this. Now let's look at some of the verbal questions. So let me just see this. I just want to mention it. Christiane mentions, what advice and resources do you recommend for students that are taking SAT and ACT for the first time? Okay, let me see if I can answer that so it'll make really real sense to you. I would make sure that you, before you take it for the first time, you get really familiar with the exam. I would certainly learn the strategies and the basic skills. First learn the basic skills and the strategies, and then take a few, maybe 1 or 2 practice exams. Then, after taking a few practice exams and looking at the answers, especially if you look at my books and you see the explanatory answers, key to basic skills and strategies, and you learn those and you say, oh yeah, I could have used this and this, then you're in a position to take it for the first time. I wouldn't take it for the first time cold. I wouldn't take it with just going over, like a simple exam or something like that. I would learn it as if, you want to get it so that you know strategies and basic skills. And when you take it for the first time, you should be in a position to really use that information. By the way, I want to mention to you, if you do take it and you're taking it for practice, make sure whether it's the ACT or the SAT, you find out from the websites of theirs when the exams are disclosed. This is very important information I'm giving you. Find out when the exams are disclosed. That is, when can you get back a copy of your exam? The SAT, it's usually January, May, and October. That can change, though. But you want to find that out. The ACT, I forget the exact times the ACT has it, but I think it's 3 times a year also. So you want to, the dates are in my books, of course, but you want to make sure that you take that exam those times and register for that question and answer disclosure service, if it's the SAT or the ACT, I forgot what they call that. but you want to make sure you get the exams back so you can look at what you've done wrong and learn from it. So if you're taking it for the first time and you're doing it that way, you want to look at that. The other thing is you want to call the schools up and find out how, with the schools you're applying to, is what do they do if you take the exam 5 times? Do they average the scores? Do they take the highest score? What do they do? And this can change through year to year. So those are very, very important things that you should be doing. So again, taking it for the first time, you might say, oh, well, you don't have to do much studying. I would not try to make mistakes, because if you take it for the first time and you make a mistake at something, you may be reinforcing those errors. And you don't want that to happen. So let's look at one of the verbal questions. Let's look at a sentence completion. Oh, I just have another question that I want to just flash up here. Which book would you recommend buying to learn some more of these strategies? Okay, I would buy the SAT, the Gruber. Let's see if I can show you that here. The Gruber Complete Guide, that's a 215 guide. I would buy that. The ACT is also the 215, the same type of cover. But that's the book I would buy for that. And look at my website. You know, my website is we change the slides every time. I'm not sure I can get back to the first slide here. Let me get back to the first slide here. I hate to bother you with this, doing this like this. Probably the easiest way to do this for me right now. I wonder why. Oh, I see why this is, because I don't have my computer over here. Yeah. The SAT is there, the ACT is there, the PSAT I have there. And those are the most important books you should get. I mean, for the SAT strategies, you get the SAT Guide 2014. For the ACT, you get the ACT Guide 2014. For the PSAT, you get the PSAT Guide 2014. Those are the main books. And if you happen to be getting the GRE, it would be GRE 2014. So that would be that. Let's go back now to the verbal strategies. Okay. Now, being a somewhat person, he insisted at the conference that when he spoke, he was not interrupted. Now, so you're saying, what are you looking for? Try to get involved with it. Try to get excited about this thing if you can. He insisted. That's a very powerful word. He insisted. I insist that I do this. What kind of person is that? Well, is he a very successful person? Possibly. A delightful? I wouldn't quite say he's delightful if he said he insisted. I insist you do this. That's not so delightful. A headstrong? Not bad for a choice. Yeah, that's pretty headstrong, all right. An understanding? I insist you do this. No, I don't think that's very understanding. A solitary person? Oh, I insist that you do this. I'm very solitary. No. It would have to be headstrong. Okay? I mean, you don't have to get fired up the way I get it. You don't have to get, emotional the way I get with it. But that's what I would say. And I would say the insisted, so what would you say the strategy is? Try the choices out, yes. Watch for keywords. Insisted. Okay, so the keywords are the things. Let's look at the next one. Now this is a 2-sentence question. 2. In spite of something of a presentation, many people were with the speaker's concepts and ideas. So in spite of, what's a key word here? Well, or a key set of words? In spite of, right? In other words, there's a contradiction going on. So whatever her presentation was, something had to be different. So let's look for two words that are different. We look for contrasts, okay? So in spite of the interest in her presentation, many people were enthralled. I wouldn't say that, because in spite of the interest, why they would be enthralled, right? In spite of the power, they were taken. Yeah, they would be taken. Why would they be in spite of it? In spite of the intensity, they'd be shocked? I don't think so. In spite of the greatness, they'd be gratified. In spite of the greatness? Because of the greatness, they may have been gratified. In spite of the strength, they were bored. Yeah, in spite of the strength, she was strong in her presentation, and you were bored? Contrast there. So you see, the first one is not opposite. Second one is not opposite. Third one is not opposite. Fourth one is not opposite, but the fifth one is opposite. Now, I'll tell you something. Many people, you got to be careful when you do this. Many people want to work. You can work from choice E backwards, because usually the test maker will try to lure you in to a choice A. It doesn't mean choice A is always wrong. This is especially true if you have a math question, like which fraction is greater than a third. There you might want to go from choice E backwards, because the test maker will try to see whether you make a mistake going through. In this case, of course, if I worked backwards, I'd see there was an opposite, but I still might want to check the other choices just to see if there was a better opposite. Okay, let's look at the next example. Suppose you account to a word like inextricable. Now, this actually happened to me. I was working with a kid on the SAT on the phone. Sometimes I work with them on the phone. And the person said, "What is the meaning of inextricable?" And I forgot what the meaning was. I actually forgot. And of course, I could have cheated, and it was on the phone, so I could have gotten a dictionary and looked at the dictionary, and But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to actually see if I could do it, because I'm working with a student. So I thought, well, how do I figure that out? Well, in, let's say, means not, but then I don't know what the extrict part is. Then I thought, wait a minute, use one of my strategies. Associate the word with another word. Extra, not too extra. Let's say we say extricable as extra, not too extra. That doesn't make a word. What other word? Extract, not to extract. That makes a word. So I could figure out then inextricable using prefixes and roots, the in is not, and associate the extric with extract. Inextricable means not to extract, so it means inseparable. And that's how I figured it out. This is what you need to do on the exam. If you forget something, try to think of, what can I do to figure this out? You track. Be is an away from, so it has a negative connotation. Magnanimous. Oh, what does that mean? Magnify? It's a big sounding word? Probably means something very big. Ebullient. Now there you wouldn't, it's hard to figure out from what the word is, but ebullient sounds big, so I would think it was big. Okay, let's look at the writing. Which underlying portion has an error? A, B, C, or D, or is in no error either? Until this train stopped at the station, neither the engineer or the conductor were aware that one of the passengers had become ill. You say to yourself, well, neither which is it? Until the train stopped at the station. That sounds okay. But neither the engineer nor the conductor were. Well, when you say neither were, it's one or the other, right? So look at what you have to have. It's not, you didn't say engineer and conductor. You said engineer nor the conductor, so you'd say was. Because if you use them separately, you'd say engineer was and conductor was. You see how, now this is a classic example. It's going to appear on many different forms on the exam. Let's look at the second example. Which word or words correctly replace the underlying words? If the sentence is correctly stamped, then choose choice A. Dr. Seuss, whose 44 books have sold more than 500 million copies, have made him probably the best-selling author in history. Now, is there anything wrong with that? What would you say? Dr. Seuss, whose 44 books have sold more than 5 million copies. Let's see how we figure this out. Watch the comma placement. You see the phrase, whose 44 books have sold more than 5 million copies? You could have left that out. That's what's called a parenthetical statement. It's not necessary. In other words, if I left that out, I would read Dr. Seuss have made him probably. So the have made him should be is. Dr. Seuss's 44 books have sold more than 5 million copies is probably the best-selling author in children's history. You know, it's interesting because grammar is very mathematical. There's a reason why it's done the way it's done, why the words are put in the way they are. So be very careful of watch the subtlety of this. So let's summarize. Let's figure out what. Let's see. We have another example. If we did that example. Yeah, we did that. Let me go back to the. main board in case you want the reference of that. What in summary would you say? Let's say we would try to figure out what do I do as a time scale thing? How do I prepare for, let's say, an SAT or ACT exam? Well, I probably want to learn. Certainly want to make sure I know the basic skills. So I take one of my books, go through the basic skills, learn what's in the basic skills. Make sure I know what an odd number is. I know that 4 to the 3rd times 4 to the 7th is 4 to the 11th. 4 to the 3rd times 4 to the 7th is 4 to the 10th, sorry. Now, the exponents. I want to make sure that I know all those basic skills cold. I want to make sure I know prefixes and roots. There's I have this in the book. There's 40, 50 prefixes and roots and give you the meaning of 200,000 words. I mean, you may as well learn those. So that if I see a word like detract, I know that de means away from. I know that tract is traction, right? So you want to make sure that you learn that. You want to make sure that in reading, and I want to tell you something about reading, because we didn't really get into this too much. When you look at a passage, you want to try to get involved with the passage. Whatever you do, don't look at the questions first. This is a mistake people make. And a lot of courses will say to do this and they shouldn't. Because research shows that if you do that, you'll actually get a lower score. So you don't want to look at the questions first. You want to get involved with the passage, and you'll almost anticipate the questions. So as I'm looking at the passage, if I see, let's say as an example, first passage starts out 500 years ago. Don't you think I'm going to actually be very proactive and calculate that? Not passive, but active, and calculate, what does that mean? 500 years ago. I calculated 500. 2,000 now, 2,000 minus 500, that's 1,500. We're in the 1,500s. Now it gives me a picture of what I'm reading. And this motivates me to go on with the rest of the passage. So I accomplished two things. Not only have I figured out what the time period was, but it motivates me to go on with the rest of the passage. So let's say I'm reading the passage and it says, and Einstein doesn't believe that nature plays dice with the universe. Well, that's a very curious statement. I don't have to necessarily think about that so much, but I'm going to underline it. And I might want to think about, what that is in context of the rest of the passage. So you want to get involved with the passage. If you see a passage and it's about two people arguing and then they make up after they argue, you can be sure there's going to be a question on why did they make up after they were arguing. So you want to get really involved. And you'll be able to almost, just like a test maker does this, you'll be able to almost anticipate all the questions that are being asked. You may not anticipate all of them, but at least most of them. So if I see a word that's very curious, like interminable, I'm going to think, hey, they may ask a question about what in context that word means. So it's the active approach to reading, and I know that when I look at a reading passage, and I can anticipate, if I'm on a test, or when I had been on a test, and look at a reading passage, I know once I start anticipating the questions and saying, oh, I see they can ask this and this, I feel so much more confident in answering the questions that come. And the chances are is those questions will be very much like what I anticipated. I'm not saying you have to anticipate it while you're reading it. I'm saying getting involved with it so that you feel, oh, I see, this could be asked, or I see why this is being said. I see why they wrote it this way. I see why there was a contrast. I see why there was an argument. I see what the purpose of this was. You see, so that's essentially what you want to get out of, that the active approach is very important. How do you get the active approach? How do you get like what I do? How do you get enthusiastic like I get? How do you get involved like I get? You have to learn the basic skills. You have to learn the strategies. You have to start looking at the strategies and seeing how many different types of questions you can answer. Now, in my books, I have made sure that I had many different looking questions based on the same strategy. So that, one time I went to an attorney and I said to the attorney, I said, why is it that I look at the College Board's SAT test and even the ACT, and I see questions which are almost identical to the questions I have in my books? They're not going to be so bold as to steal questions from me, are they? And then I asked a cognitive psychologist in Santa Barbara, I remember, and I was really curious about this. I said, how does this happen? He says, this is because when I do this, I do it in a thinking way. I do this where I strategize, I see the strategy, and it's almost common sense that that's the way it works. When they figure a question out, they give it to 3 people. They see statistically that it works, and because it works, they use it. In other words, if 3 people get it right, and there's no problem with it, and statistically it looks like it's working, that's how they'll use it. So the common sense always overrides the statistics in the sense that if it's common sense and it works, and it's logical, it works, statistically it's going to work. So that's essentially why my methods and why my questions can reflect a lot of what's going on with the SAT and the ACT. And that was the answer. It's not that they're stealing off what I'm doing, or getting questions and trying to write similar questions. It's that this is how they're they may be influenced at some of my work, but this is how when they field test it out, they're seeing that it works statistically. And I have one up in a sense where I'm getting the common sense, which I think is the better way to do it, because that the common sense and the logical approach is the way to go. And that's how you should think about this. You should see, what's the most creative way I can do this problem? What's the most efficient way I could do this problem? If it gives me odd numbers in the question, I'm going to use that. If a question has a word that's very negative, I'm going to use that fact. So these are all things that I think, are important for you to know. Again, if you want to write me, Dr. DrGaryGruber, yahoo.com. That'll get it directly to me. You can always check go to the website and contact me possibly through there too. The website you have on there, drgarygruber.com. Loads of information on the website. I would take a look at some of the examples that I had, some of the short tests that I put up there. I have a lot of information on that. And you might want to check some of the Huffington Post things that I did. I'm just trying to think of other things. Oh, definitely, please do this. I think it's not a bad talk that I gave. On my website, I have a presentation I did with the Marin County Board of Education, and it's a 50-minute or so presentation, and it really discusses a lot of the stuff we're talking about. And you should take a look at that. It's on YouTube also, but you could click it on my website and find it directly on the website. I would look at that. I really think you should. That I would do. I would look at that video presentation that I did for the Marin County Board of Education. Again, on my website. And of course, the books are there. And again, if you have any question, give me write me, and I'll be happy to do that. Many times I'll work individually with students. And if you're interested in that, just write me on the website, Dr. Gary Gruber at yahoo.com, because that'll get to me directly and won't go to spam or anything like that. So it's been, as always, a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you luck. I hate to use the word luck because it's not luck. It's you really have to do the work on the exam. And again, write me if you have any questions. Great speaking with you again.